Hey everyone, welcome back. We love to get kind of esoteric on this show, and today's deep dive is no exception. We're jumping headfirst into the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation.
Really a classic,
Oh yeah. Have you read it?
cover to cover. Multiple times, actually. It's one of those books that reveals something new each time you return to it.
That's what I like to hear. And this one, with this subtitle, The Method of Realizing Nirvana Through Knowing the Mind. It's promising a whole new level of understanding.
It's definitely aiming high. But that's the essence of Tibetan Buddhism, isn't it? This idea that the path to liberation lies within our own minds.
Okay, see, that's what I love about these deep dives, getting right to the heart of it. But before we get totally cosmic, I gotta admit, the book's backstory has me intrigued too. Compiled and translated by a member of the Theosophical Society. That's not your average book club material.
Not at all. W.Y. Evans Wentz, the editor, he was quite the character. Totally dedicated to bridging Eastern and Western thought. But here's the kicker. He couldn't actually read Tibetan.
Wait, seriously?
Yep. Relied on a whole team of translators.
So we're talking like ancient wisdom passed down, whispered down the lane style. That just adds another layer to this whole thing. One of those translators even worked with Alexandra David Neal, right? The explorer.
That's right. She was a remarkable figure in her own right. But this approach, this layering of perspectives, it's not just a quirk of the book's creation. It actually reflects something fundamental about Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, like what?
The way knowledge is transmitted, passed down through lineages of teachers and texts, each adding their own insights, their own interpretations.
So it's like the book itself becomes a kind of living lineage.
Yeah.
Carrying that wisdom forward.
Exactly. And speaking of carrying wisdom forward, the book dives into the story of a figure who's practically synonymous with Tibetan Buddhism, Padmasambhava.
Now, his story.
Yeah.
That's where things start to feel a little more mythical, right? Born from a lotus blossom, battling demons.
He certainly had a flair for the dramatic, but those fantastical elements, they're not meant to be taken literally.
More like metaphors.
Exactly. Think of them as symbolic narratives, like myths in other cultures. They convey profound truths through imagery and allegory.
Okay, so less history textbook, more cosmic comic book.
In a way, yes. The lotus blossom, for example, emerging from muddy water to bloom in pristine beauty, it symbolizes spiritual awakening, even amidst the challenges of life.
So it's not so much about the historical accuracy, but more about understanding the deeper symbolism. Like those ancient stories are trying to tell us something about ourselves, about reality itself.
Precisely, and while Padmasambhava's story is certainly captivating, the book emphasizes that we can all achieve a different kind of magic, the magic of inner transformation through understanding our own minds. Which brings us to the heart of the book, really, the yoga of knowing the mind.
The yoga of knowing the mind. Okay, yeah, that feels pretty relevant these days. Mindfulness, meditation, all that, it's everywhere you look. Is that kind of what we're getting into here?
You're definitely picking up what this book is putting down. It's all about understanding your own mind, seeing it for what it is, and through that, finding liberation.
Liberation, okay.
Yeah.
Big word. But there's this idea, I keep bumping into this idea of the material world being an illusion. That's a tough one for me to wrap my head around.
It's a head scratcher for sure. Not that the physical world doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about our attachment to it, how we think it's fixed and unchanging.
So like our perceptions can be deceiving, right?
Exactly. And it's that clinging to a fixed reality that causes suffering, especially when things inevitably change, which they always do.
Okay, so less about the world being a hologram, more about shifting our perspective, understanding that impermanence. But how do you actually do that? How do you put that into practice?
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? This book is big on practical techniques. Mindfulness of breath is one they talk about, focusing your attention on just the sensation of breathing.
Just breathe, huh? Sounds simple enough.
Deceptively simple. It's about calming the mental chatter, being present, That's how you start to detach from those rigid views.
Creating some space between you and all the thoughts swirling around in your head.
Exactly. You are not your thoughts. And that leads to another important distinction the book makes. Wisdom versus knowledge.
Ooh, I like where this is going. I can spend all day absorbing information, but turning that into real wisdom, that's the real work. What's the secret?
Well, the book suggests that knowledge is like collecting facts, right? But wisdom, that's about understanding what connects those facts. Seeing the bigger picture, the why behind it all.
So it's not enough to just know a bunch of stuff. It's about how I use it, how it all fits together.
Exactly. It's knowledge in action, you could say. And this leads to Well, let's just say a different way of looking at things, like good and evil, for example.
Yeah, the book doesn't exactly shy away from the big questions, does it? I mean, suggesting that good and evil aren't absolutes, that's a pretty bold statement. So are we just tossing out morality altogether?
Well, hold on. It's not about saying anything goes. It's more about recognizing that our rigid moral codes, they have limitations.
Like what's considered right or wrong can change depending on the context.
Exactly. Think about it. What was considered morally acceptable centuries ago might be unthinkable today.
Okay, yeah, good point. So this isn't about abandoning ethics, but maybe just acknowledging the shades of gray.
Precisely. Acting from a place of compassion, understanding that we're all connected, making choices that benefit everyone involved. That's the real focus.
So less about labeling actions as inherently good or bad, and more about understanding their impact.
Cause and effect. And that brings us to another concept that's central to this whole interconnectedness thing, karma.
Okay, so we're not talking about some cosmic point system here, right? Like,
Yeah.
do good things, win a prize.
Not quite. It's
Yeah.
more about recognizing that our actions have consequences.
Yeah.
We're responsible for the energy we put out into the world.
Right, so we're all connected. Our inner world, our actions, it all impacts the bigger picture. But then it goes even further, right? There's a whole thing about astrology, celestial bodies. Now that's where I start to lose the plot a little. Astrology, huh? Makes me think of those newspaper horoscopes. Today's the day to wear red and call your mother. But I'm guessing that's not quite the vibe here.
Not quite. It's less about predicting your future based on your birth date and more about recognizing the interconnectedness of, well, everything.
Okay, so less about me and my lucky numbers and more about us being part of something bigger.
Exactly. This book suggests that our inner world, our state of mind, it's not separate from the cosmos. We're constantly interacting with these larger forces, even if we don't realize it.
Okay, I can get behind that. We're all connected, vibes and all that. But how does astrology fit into all of this?
Well, it's not so much about literal stars dictating our fate. It's more about understanding that we exist within this web of interconnected forces, seen and unseen.
So less about Mercury is in retrograde, more about recognizing the ebb and flow of energies.
That's a good way to put it. And it ties back into that idea of personal responsibility we were talking about.
Yeah.
If our inner states are intertwined with the cosmos, then cultivating inner peace and clarity, that can ripple outwards.
Okay, so it's not just about personal enlightenment. It's about impacting the world around us.
Exactly. It's like that quote from the book, "To whatever the mind goeth, that it becometh."
Oh, I like that. So what we focus on, what we give our energy to, that's what we bring into being.
Precisely. Focus on negativity, fear, limitation, and those patterns will show up in your life. But if you choose to cultivate compassion, understanding, a sense of connection.
Then that's the energy you put out into the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so powerful, even after all these centuries. It's a call to conscious living.
Be mindful of what we're putting out into the world, because we're not just along for the ride. We're active participants, co-creators of our own reality.
Absolutely. We have more agency than we often realize.
That's something to think about. Wow, this deep dive has been a journey. Ancient wisdom, cosmic connections, and it all comes back to understanding our own minds.
It's all connected.
That's for sure. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today. But hey, that's what these deep dives are all about, right?
Asking the big questions, exploring new perspectives.
Exactly. And we've only just scratched the surface of this book. So much to discover, so much to ponder.
Keep those questions coming, keep exploring.
And remember, to whatever the mind goeth, that it becometh. Choose those thoughts wisely, everyone. Until next time, happy diving.